Picture this. The stage lights have gone down. The audience is still mesmerized by the majestic shadows of last night's concert. And from a distance, you can hear the light but sure footsteps. Not just any ordinary tread, but like the rhythm that marks the rise of a king who no longer sits on his throne, but walks towards his own destiny. That name, Kim Taehyung, or as the world knows him, V of BTS. But tonight, that title feels too narrow, because behind his name and global status as part of the world's biggest music group, Taehyung is rewriting his story. This time not with lyrics dictated by a company, nor with concepts curated by an agency, but with wild, honest, and almost holy steps. The footsteps of a king who chooses to dance outside the path of the musical empire that raised him. HYBE. HYBE, as we know, is not just a record label. It is a modern entertainment empire that controls the flow of music, visual concepts, and public interactions of its artists with almost scientific precision. And BTS? They are the princes shaped by that system. But a true king, he is not made, he is born. And Taehyung, he slowly shows that even though he was born into the system, his soul never fully belongs to the system. In his silence, in the blank stares that occasionally appear behind his stage smile, in his artistic choices that seem foreign to HYBE's grand scheme, he seems to whisper to the discerning observer, "Look deeper. This is not just a career, this is an escape." Taehyung, with his solo releases, self-directed music videos, and aesthetics that often deviate from HYBE's mainstream style, is dancing in a nearly taboo territory, freedom of expression that does not bow to the patterns of mass production. He is not just taking risks, he is challenging the entire architecture behind the success that many idols boast. Is this a form of rebellion? Or is it the pinnacle of an artist's evolution? Watch his moves, from his choice of jazz and soul genres that are barely K-pop, to his concept of music videos with narratives that offer no explanation, only feelings. From artistic photo shoots that are far from the typical Korean visual idol image, to more personal social interactions, sometimes even too human for a HYBE celebrity. None of this is a coincidence. This is a deliberate dance. And his footsteps are increasingly moving away from the prepared path. Why is this move important? Because in an ecosystem built on discipline, unity, and complete control, someone who chooses to dance alone is not only endangering the system, he can inspire change. Taehyung, with all his artistic gentleness and silence, is creating a silent revolution. He shows that growing up in the system doesn't mean dying in it. At the end of the day, we might ask, will he ever come back? Or will his wild steps take him to a whole new level? What is certain is that we are witnessing more than just a solo career. We are witnessing the existential journey of an artist who finally chooses to be himself, not as V from BTS, not as a product of HYBE, but as Taehyung, the king who chooses his own path, and dances not for the audience, but for his imprisoned soul. And when the spotlight comes back on, there is no grand stage, no uniform choreography. Just one figure, standing alone in the middle of a silent space. He turns to the camera, not to say hello, but as if to say, "Now, I dance for me." In the precision-crafted world of K-pop, every movement of an idol's body is a curated language. But Taehyung, he's starting to speak a different language. Gone are the symmetrical movements that are synonymous with group choreography. Now, his arms dance in slow rhythm, his eyes sometimes closed, his lips half whispering in songs that almost feel like poetry. He refuses to be a star who only shines when given light. Instead, he creates light from within himself. Look at how he performs songs like "Love Me Again" or "Rainy Days," not as a performance, but as an outpouring. His voice isn't faked, not forced to hit high notes for the sake of admiration. He sings like someone sitting in a corner of a cafe on a rainy day, just wanting to be heard without being understood. And perhaps that's the boldest side of the king's footsteps. He's no longer performing to impress. He just wants to be real. Art as escape or statement. And so the question that hangs among fans, observers, and even fellow artists is Taehyung running away or showing a new direction? Let's look at how he prefers vintage-style editorial fashion to glamour, HYBE's signature futuristic. How he's more comfortable appearing at a small art gallery than at a global press conference. He's not a commercial ambassador on the Paris runway, but as a person who loves the silence of the fashion crowd. Taehyung is rewriting the definition of idol. He's blurring the lines between celebrity and artist. And perhaps in secret, he's separating himself from the label that has been his public identity for so long. HYBE, of course, sees all of this. But can they stop him? Because the king's footsteps are not rebellion, they're evolution. A lonely but glorious path. A journey off the beaten path is a lonely one. There's no guarantee of the spotlight, no crowd applause like at a big concert. But that's the path Taehyung is choosing. He's walking alone, but with his head held high. He knows that with every step he takes outside HYBE's lines, there's the risk of loss. Loss of exposure, loss of connection, even the understanding of fans who are used to seeing him in a certain format. But he also knows that only by walking alone, he can find himself. And in that silence, we can hear more clearly. The voice of an artist's heart. The inner echo of a king who doesn't need a kingdom to establish his throne. Someday, maybe we'll look back and realize that this moment, when Taehyung started dancing his own way, was the beginning of something bigger. Not the end of BTS, but the beginning of Taehyung. Not a betrayal of the system, but a liberation from invisible shackles. And who knows, the footsteps of this king will become a map for the next generation. Because in a world where everything is regulated, freedom is the most radical art form. So when the final stage lights go out and the music stops, only one thing remains in the air. That step. An honest step. A step that no longer belongs to HYBE, but to Taehyung himself. And all of us, viewers, fans, observers, we're lucky to witness that dance. The dance of a king, who ultimately chose to dance alone. When the king no longer sits on his throne, every kingdom has its protocols, every prince has its rules to follow. But what if a king chose to leave his throne not because he was forced to, not because he was defeated, but because he found himself freer to walk without a crown? Taehyung now is no longer just one of 7. He is not just a V with a perfect face and a mesmerizing baritone voice. He is a seeker, a wanderer in an art world too often confined to a format. He did not burn bridges, did not destroy the buildings that raised him. He simply opened a window and stepped outside to see the world with his own eyes. And ironically, it is outside of that system that his charm shines brightest. Not because of crazy promotions, not because of skyrocketing streaming numbers, but because of the courage to be yourself in a system designed for uniformity. Fans who follow, not instructions. What makes this story even more astonishing is how the fans, ARMY, and even the general public didn't push away. They moved closer. They followed Taehyung's every step with a curiosity that is no longer fanatical, but spiritual. A photo without a caption. A song without explicit lyrics. A story post with dim lighting and the sound of his dog Yeontan in the distance. Everything is read, interpreted, understood. Because in that ambiguity, there is honesty. In that irregularity, there is real life. Conclusion. In the noisy entertainment world, the quiet steps of a king are often more shocking than the drums of war. Taehyung did not proclaim a rebellion. He just walked, slowly, consistently, and meaningfully. And with every step, he left a trace. A trace that will not only be treaded by fans, but will also be an inspiration for many artists who have been trapped in system. When the history of Korean music is rewritten, there will be a special chapter about a king who left his path, not to disappear, but to create a new one. That was the king's footsteps, and he still dances for himself, for art, and for all those who dare to choose their own path, even without the guarantee of applause.